Lives of the Gods, Divinity in Maya art, confronts a fundamental question, a question that all people in all times and in all places face. How do you give form to divine power? How do you visualize the gods? And further, how do these objects play a role in the lives of individuals and communities, for communication with the gods, for interactions with divine power?
Religion permeated every aspect of the life of Maya peoples, ancient and modern. It is not exaggerated to say that the entire world was conceived as animated with deities thought to be present in mountains, the heavens, the water. And all these deities related to people in very immediate ways.
Lives of the Gods, Divinity in Maya art, introduces us to a rich creative expression of Maya artists, primarily of the Classic period, between 250 AD and 900 AD. The exhibition includes almost 100 very important artworks coming from places in southern Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras.
It is a great opportunity for us to put together the great advances that have been made in the interpretation of ancient Maya art and religion over the last few decades. Advances in the decipherment of Maya hieroglyphic inscriptions, but also through collaboration with modern Maya who still maintain some of the religious practices and beliefs that are visible in ancient Maya art. Maya religious practices often involved taking care of the gods and goddesses. It's perhaps a little bit of a paradox that these beings are powerful, they can influence human life, but at the same time, they depend on people to sustain them. They need to be sheltered, they need to be taken care of, and they need to be fed with actual food, with drink, with resins that were burned, with prayer and the sound of musical instruments and dancing. All of that was conceived as ways in which people not only interacted with the god but also sustained them. What's important to understand is that for the Maya, creation is something that happened through a very long process. It was not the work of a single deity or even a small group of deities, and it was not like the gods had a clear view of what they wanted to achieve from the beginning. So rather, what we get is a story of protracted struggle in which the gods are trying and failing. They are also coming against one another. There are creations and destructions, and they're unhappy with the kinds of things that they are achieving until finally they start getting better results.
So this is the back of a throne. So there would have been a bench in front of it with legs, and a king or a queen would have been seated in the context of a primordial event. The two nearly life-size figures are seated cross-legged, and they're carved in silhouette in the eyes of a sacred mountain. The figure on the right is most certainly a king. He has a wonderful feather headdress and a circular element that tells us that he is linked with the god Itzamna, one of the creator gods. And he's leaning into a small figure that is seated between him and the other figure. And one of the things I really love about this is I think if you're accustomed to Western art, you look at this trio and you think it's a family unit. It's a father, a mother, and a child. But then you look at it closely and you realize that that diminutive figure has wings on the arms, that the head is sort of jaguar-like. It's a messenger from that great celestial god.
So gods had avian creatures who play the role of their messengers, like bringing sometimes life-changing messages, in this case probably to a ruler. We shall not forget that this is incomplete. There's a section that's missing, both of the carving and the text, and so there are things that we cannot understand unless someday that missing portion is located. In stories of Maya creation, people originated before the sun came out. That's an important detail that we need to keep in mind. It's not like the sun was there at the beginning. On the contrary, the first people lived in the night. They had no light, they had no heat, the earth was muddy, and so they lived miserable lives. In addition, the earth was still populated by nightly creatures, which are fearsome. And these include animals, such as jaguars, but also other kinds of beings that belong to the realm of nocturnal deities or supernatural characters that live in the night. All of this ended when the sun came out. The sun dried the earth, brought the necessary light and the alternation of day and night that allows people to live and prosper, to cultivate their fields, to have some rest. We're looking here at a ceramic plate. It's very well preserved, and on the upper part of the plate there's a depiction of a mythical event in which two blowgun hunters shot a mythical bird. But this is no ordinary hunt. These are deities. One of the stories that the Maya tell is about how these twin heroes shot down a big, very proud avian character who pretended to be the sun in a former era. But he wasn't. He didn't provide the real light and heat of the sun, only a faint shine that came from his jewels, because he was a very rich and bejeweled character. So he had to be taken down before the true sun could come out. And that is what these heroes actually do.
It's interesting, the black spots on their skin.
Yeah, they are covered with black spots, and that's something that has puzzled many researchers. Some take it just as an attribute of this god. I believe that they correspond to pustules. So that indicates that these young hunters are sick. And that is a characteristic that we find in solar heroes for the Maya and other parts of Mesoamerica. So they are very poor, they are sickly, and it is very unlikely that someone like that will eventually become the sun. But according to these stories, they do.
So this is really one of my favorite sections, the section of the night. It's really a great springboard for Maya artists to create these marvelously inventive creatures and compositions, that they're very human-like, but they're also these supernatural elements. So it's just such a rich, rich area for creative expression. The night, of course, is the realm of chaos, and a lot of the nocturnal gods are like Jaguar Gods, the apex predator, nocturnal hunters. These two figures, seated cross-legged in deep relief, were found on the red altar at the site of Tonina in southern Mexico. They would have been on public display. We see their names carved on their thigh or on their belly, and we know that these were high-value prisoners, and they're about to undergo a transformation and perform the role of the Jaguar God of the underworld as part of a ritual performance. They're in this almost contorted, difficult position that you often see Maya captives in. They're kind of cramped into the visual space. But the detail that I love most is take a look at their ears. Their ears are jaguar ears, and a sort of twisted rope element between their eyes. That's another indicator of the Jaguar God.
Of course, the jaguar is a nocturnal animal, and is also a warlike character in Maya mythology. The Jaguar God that these captives are impersonating was also regarded as a celestial being, as a star. And the origin of warfare is explained in terms of a primordial conflict among the stars. So the historical characters who are portrayed here impersonating the Jaguar God are basically reiterating the episodes from the mythical story of the origin of warfare.
That's such an interesting point. And one of the aspects of this exhibition that is so important is the idea that gods are born and gods thrive, and some gods die and some are reborn. The poor Jaguar God, he meets a very bad end though, doesn't he?
There are vessels that show other gods setting him on fire, and so we would presume that he died tortured like a captive. But nevertheless, he was a god, he was revered, he was commemorated and portrayed in monumental settings at many Maya cities. Water management was very important for the Maya. In the Maya lowlands, there are few sources of surface water, People depended on water from rainfall, and they kept water during the rainy season in huge reservoirs, and that was their only resource during several months of the dry season every year. And so it is not strange to see that the god Chak, the god of rainstorms and thunder, is so important. And he is portrayed in a number of magnificent examples of Maya art, such as this vase. What we are seeing here is just a snapshot of what was surely a very long and elaborate mythical narrative. We see the god Chak depicted as a youthful character, posed in a very dynamic way, probably dancing. The background has this blackwash painting which indicates water. The next character is a death god. He's also dancing, extending his arms towards the baby. Except that this is no ordinary baby. It has jaguar paws and it has a jaguar tail, and the rather fearsome face of a god. In the other vessel, we see the death god. We see Chak with his axe, and the axe was supposed to represent lightning. And then the inscriptions that tell the same thing, that the god was thrown. So how do we make sense of all of this? This vessel has a clue. One of the isolated glyphs right above the figure of Chak can be read as Yashhal, first rain. Much of the Maya lowlands are relatively dry, so water is a very important resource for the Maya that had to be kept through the dry season. And so that gives us an idea of how important the stories that related to the god of rain and storms, Chak, were. How important it was to favor this god and to try to explain the regimes of rainfall. And this is what these vessels are about.
One of the things that's so extraordinary about this set of vessels is that they're painted in this codex style. And it's called codex style because of its relationship with these screen-fold bark paper manuscripts that we know were used in this period. Unfortunately, we don't have any from this period. Indeed, we only have 4 from a later period, only 4 from the entire pre-Hispanic period in the Americas. So these are such a precious, direct view into Maya beliefs and Maya history that we know from the texts that are so carefully painted around these vessels.
In these vessels, they just painted a very short caption, because these were things that perhaps everyone knew. The stories were known and they didn't need to explain them. Rather, it seems that the purpose was not just to decorate these vessels, but to make them significant as objects that a king would use, that would allow a king or a queen to relate themselves to the origin myths.
It's just a beautiful example of one of the world's great scribal traditions.
Maize was the staple of Maya subsistence. Let's remember that maize was domesticated in ancient Mexico thousands of years ago. The plant that now feeds so many people around the earth was a product of the ancient peoples of Mesoamerica. For the Maya, it was a precious thing. They not only depended on it for subsistence, but also venerated it and personified it as a young god who was in the full strength and handsomeness of young age.
It's so interesting what you're saying about the preciousness, because the maize god is always depicted with beautiful jade jewelry. He's dripping with luxury, and he's associated with luxurious things. And he's always depicted as this beautiful young man. And we see that his head is really rendered almost as a maize cob with this lovely luxuriant hair like the corn silk and the leafy elements extending above his head. He is often shown dancing. Here we see one hand up, one hand down, and this was one of 20 busts that would have adorned a temple at the site of Copan.
But the maize god was not just a patron of maize. He was a patron of all things that were abundant, all kinds of wealth, like you mentioned, jade, but also cacao, the source of our modern chocolate, was also an attribute of the maize god. And sometimes we see him portrayed as a cacao tree with fruits growing from all over his body.
It's eternally springing forward in luxuriant vegetation and richness. He's one of these gods that Maya kings loved. He's born, he thrives, he dies, but then he's reborn. So in many ways, he provides an optimistic model. If you're a monarch, you're going to put a maize god in your tomb because you have this idea that you too, when you die, you will be reborn.
In fact, several important kings, such as the great Kinich Hanal Pakal of Palenque, were portrayed in death with the appearance of the maize god, not just dying, but also coming back to life, re-emerging and achieving a divine destiny.
He's really the paradigmatic god for this idea of regeneration, rebirth, and resilience. I mean, he really echoes the life cycle of this staple crop of the Maya. The final section of the exhibition brings us to a series of spectacular monuments depicting rulers, but especially showing us the very close relationship between political and divine power. We see that the rulers were also, to a certain degree, the connection between the gods and the community, in part responsible for the welfare of the gods. You had to take care of the gods, and then they would take care of you.
This is a panel that originated from a Maya city in the Usumacinta River region, a region that was especially renowned for the great quality of its sculptures. What we see is the figure of a woman who is wearing a very elegant huipil or blouse that goes down to her ankles. And you can even see the bottom of her skirt under the textile that was so carefully depicted. That is no accident, because textiles were items of wealth among the Maya, and making fine woven clothes was an essential activity done by women. It also gave a woman a very important economic role in society. So this woman is wrapped in all kinds of wealth. And besides that, she is holding on her right hand the effigy of a god that was particularly associated with abundance and wealth. Awil, it's one of the really important deities in the Maya pantheon, and a very complex one.
Maya rulers did not so much call themselves divine, but they would describe themselves as being god-like. And often these monuments celebrate this very close relationship between gods and rulers. In this wonderful depiction of a royal woman, we see the god Kawil, and he's reaching back towards her, arms up, gesticulating, as if they're having this wonderful, lively conversation. One of the really great things about this piece in particular is that we also have the names of the sculptors. There is one name sculpted in the background of this panel and another name to the right. This sculptor's name, King Lakam Chak, this relatively new understanding about artist signatures, artist names, artist tags has been so revealing about workshop practice, but also the role of Maya artists in court society. We have far more sculptors' names than we do painters' names. And so the question is really, is it because these are large, complex works that you would have to work in pairs? Is this a master and apprentice? Or is one of the artists primarily engaged in the text and the other in the carving itself? I think there's so much more that we have to learn still about these exciting new discoveries about Maya artists. These are the only artist names we have for all of the ancient Americas.
This is one of the most famous sculptures in ancient Maya art. It is a throne that was found in the palace of Piedras Negras, a major city in the Usumacinta region of Guatemala. The inscription tells a rather detailed story about the last king that we know from Piedras Negras. Interestingly, Maya scribes were not shy about telling stories that related with political struggles among the kings and noble people, and it appears that this ruler, King Inich Yatak III, came to power amid a series of struggles that are partly told in the legs of this bench. You can see traces of the red pigment in many parts of the back of the throne.
Yeah, and the composition is just marvelous. We see the two busts silhouetted in the eyes of a supernatural creature, perhaps an animate mountain.
In the eyes, there are human characters who are looking at each other, almost like reflections in a mirror. But who these are is a question that has been difficult to answer. They may be two portraits of the king, but the position of these portraits in the eyes of a mythical creature shows us how kings were regarded as closely related to divine power.
It's an extraordinary composition, and interestingly, we recognize the name of one of the sculptors, King Lakam Chak, who also worked on the panel of the royal woman. So we, again, have these great insights now into artistic practice and artists in the royal courts. And there's another signature right there. I mean, these are pretty prominent artist signatures here.
They are. And that's a hallmark of the late sculptures of Piedras Negras. That's a site where artists and especially sculptors were given a particularly important place.
This was one of the last works to be created at the site of Piedras Negras. After this work was created, this site fell silent, but also the city-state that probably attacked this work also fell silent. So what we're really seeing here is we're seeing a period of tremendous artistic innovation. It is the apex, but it's also the end of one great tradition before these great city-states fall silent and new traditions arise elsewhere. So what do you want visitors to take away from this exhibition?
There's the beauty of Maya art, which I think everyone will be able to appreciate, even without a deep understanding of the meanings of these complex artworks. But then there's also an appreciation of the intellectuality and of the very complex beliefs that the ancient Maya had about the world and about divine beings.
There's so many important aspects of this exhibition that provide us with opportunities to reflect on our own lives and the idea of how do we relate to higher powers, but also artistic expression, the imagination, the creativity that goes into these works, but also just the extraordinary achievements of the artists.
It is also very important to realize that while some of the cities were abandoned at the end of the classic period in the 9th century, Maya civilization did not disappear, Maya people did not disappear, and nowadays there are over 6 million people who speak Maya languages in Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras. In this exhibition, we also incorporated some of the very expressive ways in which modern Maya people convey their religious beliefs about how things came to be.
And I think, if anything, this exhibition reminds me so much about this idea of resilience, of change, of struggle, but also that struggle being a source of tremendous creative energy.
I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to Joanne Pillsbury, Andrall E. Pearson Curator of the Arts of the Ancient Americas at the Met, for bringing this project to fruition. She was joined by co-curators Oswaldo Chinchilla Mazariegos, Associate Professor of Anthropology at Yale University, and Laura Filloy Nadal, Associate Curator in the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing at the Met. Thank you as well to James Doyle, formerly Assistant Curator at the Met and now Director of the Madsen Museum of Anthropology at Pennsylvania State University, for initiating this project in 2018. Lives of the Gods was organized with the Kimball Art Museum, and we're grateful to our partners there, including its director Eric M. Lee and Jennifer Kessler-Price, curator of the exhibition in Fort Worth. This exhibition features some truly exceptional, rarely seen loans, so thank you very much to the institution who have so generously allowed their works to travel to the Met, especially the governments of Guatemala and Mexico, as well as major museum collections in Europe, Mexico, and the United States. We are deeply indebted to our incredible donors who made this exhibition possible. Thank you to the William Randolph Hearst Foundation, the Placido Arango Fund, the Diane W. and James E. Burke Fund, the Gail and Parker Gilbert Fund, the Mellon Foundation, the International Council of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Stephanie Bernheim. We are also grateful to the Samuel I. Newhouse Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, and the Doris Duke Fund for Publications for their support of the catalog. Finally, Thank you very much to our wonderful members, whose dedication to this institution ensures the success of all we do. On behalf of everyone at the Met, thank you for joining us.